Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the headlines this hour. Hamas released a hostage video while protesters in Tel Aviv call for a deal. Military action continues across the region with Israeli strikes killing dozens. Rebels in Syria continue to take areas in Allepo as strikes from Russia against the uprising carry on. Aleppo's civilian airport is now under rebel control. Protests in Georgia have continued for a third straight day as violent clashes take place in Tbilisi. Thousands of pro-EU supporters take to the streets. US President-elect Donald Trump hails very productive talks with Canadian PM Justin Trudeau. The two meet amid tensions over potential tariffs. Trump names Kash Patel as the next director of the FBI. The Trump loyalist has previously criticised the FBI, calling for more transparency within the bureau. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te visits America to the dismay of the Chinese Communist Party. Tensions over Taiwan's independence have been rising, with US involvement throughout. Belgium could become the first nation to introduce rights for sex workers. Maternity pay and health insurance are among the employment benefits announced. Hamas have recently released a video of an Israeli-American hostage. The White House has called it a reminder of the terror. Meanwhile, Israeli strikes on Lebanon continued even 2 days after a ceasefire was called. Here is the full report.
Yael Alexander, mother of Israeli-American hostage Eden Alexander, said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu assured her. After a Hamas video showed her son pleading for freedom, the mother said the following.
לפני כשעה התקשר אליי ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו. חיזק אותי והבטיח לי שעכשיו, אחרי שיש הסדרה בלבנון, בשלו התנאים לשחרר אתכם ולהחזיר אתכם הביתה. עידן, זה גם רצון העם.
The video, the first to feature Eden since his abduction during the October 7th attack last year, left his family deeply shaken but hopeful.
סרטון שקיבלנו היום בצהריים טלטל אותי ואת משפחתי. ולצד התקווה שהוא נותן, הוא גם מראה כמה מצבו של עידן ושל שאר החטופים קשה, וכמה הם זועקים ומייחלים שנציל אותם עכשיו.
Demonstrators continued an anti-government protest at Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, asking for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages.
We want a hostage deal. We want a ceasefire in Gaza. We want the end of this horrible disaster.
Earlier in the day, the Israeli military launched airstrikes against Hezbollah positions in Lebanon and along the Syria-Lebanon border, accusing the group of smuggling weapons in violation of the ceasefire. Meanwhile, in Gaza, efforts for a ceasefire continue as a Hamas delegation in Cairo explores solutions to end the conflict. Israeli forces carried out a deadly air raid on the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, killing at least 40 Palestinians, as the overall death toll from Saturday's attacks rose to over 100. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, thousands gathered in Beirut to honor Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, killed in an Israeli attack over 2 months ago. The Middle East continues to grapple with escalating violence and fragile efforts toward peace. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some stories from across North America. The White House is actively working on a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. However, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stated that they are not there yet. He emphasised ongoing efforts with deep engagement with key regional players and continued discussions. While expressing hope for a resolution, he acknowledged that it has not yet been reached. President-elect Donald Trump has warned the BRIC nations of 100% tariffs if they attempt to undermine the US dollar. His statement on Truth Social responds to efforts to challenge its role as the primary global reserve currency. The BRIC group now includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran and the UAE. Mexican authorities have raided a Chinese megastore in Mexico City, seizing over 200,000 counterfeit products. The raid comes amid pressure from Donald Trump and other nations over trade ties with China. The economy minister and the Mexican Institute of Industrial Property led the operation at Mexico Mart. The United States has temporarily suspended imports of Mexican cattle after a case of New World screwworm was detected in Catazaya, Chiapas. This was confirmed by the Mexican government. Officials confirmed that both countries are collaborating to implement measures to restore normal cattle export operations. The suspension applies only to cattle and does not affect other Mexican exports. A Canadian territory has revised its rules for elected municipal officers, permitting them to pledge allegiance to the country's constitution rather than the crown during their swearing-in ceremonies. The decision follows the newly elected Dawson City Council in Yukon refusing to take the King's Oath. This was done in solidarity with an Indigenous council member who expressed concerns about the Crown's historical role in Canada. President-elect Donald Trump has announced that he has chosen Republican Florida Sheriff Chad Cronster. He will serve as Administrator of Drug Enforcement Administration. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump has stated that Cronster will work alongside former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. His pick to lead the Department of Justice to secure the border, stop the flow of fentanyl and other illegal drugs across the southern border. Rebel forces in Syria have taken over half of the city of Allepo on day 2 of their offensive against the Syrian government. Aleppo airport has been seized and dozens of towns nearby have also turned to rubble. In retaliation to this, Moscow, a close ally of Damascus, has now launched its first airstrike targeting the rebels. Meanwhile, the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, has broken his silence on the matter. He has vowed to defeat the terrorists. Watch this report.
In an offensive against the government of Syria, the rebel forces have seized Aleppo's civilian airport after claiming control over half of the second city, Allepo. As a result, Russian warplanes launched raids on areas of Aleppo city for the first time in 2016. The ongoing clashes in the region have raised the death toll from 183 to 311, including at least 28 civilians. The United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs have said that more than 14,000 people, nearly half of the children, have been displaced amid the violence. By Friday, the rebel group had taken over more than 50 towns and villages in the north before advancing into Aleppo. Syrians in Aleppo have also toppled the equestrian statue of President al-Assad, his brother and his father. Meanwhile, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has held a telephone conversation with his Emirati counterpart. He has said that his country could defeat all the terrorists and their backers. Speaking on the ongoing crisis, the United States of America has traded blame on the Syrian government. The US has said that the Syrian leader has lost control of Aleppo because of his reliance on Russia and Iran. The statement also negated US involvement in the offensive. Ahmad al-Issa, who is displaced from Aleppo, has said that they want to get rid of Assad's regime.
إن شاء الله راح يتكمل التحرير لحتى نخلص من بشار ونظامه كامل وناخذ منه الشام إن شاء الله.
Many anti-government Syrian fighters also celebrated as they patrol a street in Aleppo.
والله مرعوبين يعني أول شيء تعبنا وبعدين الحمد لله بلكي إن شاء الله بصير حالتنا لأحسن يعني بيروح الرعب بيروح الشيء عن الأطفال أما الأكل والشرب والمحلات تفتح مثل ما كانت السيارات تشتغل كل شيء يرجع مثل ما كان يعني هي.
Assad has been at war with opposition forces seeking his overthrow for 13 years. Now, roughly 30% of the country is not under Assad but controlled by a range of opposition forces and foreign troops. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now have a look at some news updates from across Europe. The European Union's new foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, has warned Georgian authorities over violence against demonstrators. Kallas added that options had been put forward to the EU's 27 member states on how to respond, including potentially imposing sanctions. Continuing with Kaja Kallas, the head of European Council, Antonio Costa, arrived in Kyiv on their first day in office. The visit is a symbolic show of support for Ukraine. The European Union's new leadership team is keen to demonstrate that it remains firm on backing Kyiv. Storm Bora has killed 2 people on the island of Lemnos in Greece. Roads and buildings were reported to have been damaged in roads. The storm is forecast to bring heavy snowfall to the north and northwest of the country. Scores of people have already been evacuated. Romanians have returned to the polls today to elect a new parliament with a far-right tip to win. This can potentially herald a shift in the regional policy of the NATO country bordering Ukraine. The parliamentary poll comes at a time of political turmoil, sparked when a top court ordered a recount of the first round of the separate presidential election on November the 24th. The IG Metall trade unions called for widespread labour strikes at all Volkswagen plants in Germany from Monday. It has come after negotiations over looming job cuts fell through last week. Volkswagen had earlier demanded wage cuts for workers and had threatened plant closures and mass layoffs as part of a major cost-cutting programme. Labour officials have promised to lead a bitter and intense struggle against any such cuts. In the Iceland snap elections, Social Democrats have surpassed the governing Independence Party. The snap elections were announced after the collapse of his fraught coalition government, with all bailouts counted. The Social Democrat Alliance, led by Kristrúni Frostadóttir, has secured 20.8% of the vote, while the Independence Party was trailing with 19.4%. United States President-elect Donald Trump has nominated Indian-American Kashyap Patel as the next director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Patel, a Trump loyalist, has been a controversial figure in American politics. Who is Kash Patel, and what will his appointment mean for the FBI?
The United States President-elect Donald Trump has tapped Indian-American Kashyap Patel as the next director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. For Patel to take the chair at the FBI, its current director, Christopher Wray, has to either step down or be fired. Interestingly, Wray was appointed by Trump to the post in 2017 for a 10-year tenure. But the FBI under Wray investigated Trump himself, searching his Mar-a-Lago estate in 2022 for allegations of illegally retaining top-secret documents. This is believed to have sparked Trump's ire. Consequently, in 2019, when public backlash mounted and the possibility of impeachment made headlines in the American politics, Trump proposed Kash Patel to be what he called a political executioner. Patel was tasked with vetting White House aides for loyalty to Trump. Patel's Nunes memo brought him closer to Donald Trump. He wrote this document while serving as a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee. Later, when Trump declassified the document, it fueled claims that the Justice Department's Russia investigation was politically motivated and that the FBI had spied on the Trump campaign. Patel is also known for his Cash Foundation that offers financial assistance to the families of those charged in connection with the January 6 Capitol riot. Besides, Patel served in several high-level posts during Trump's first term, including as a national security advisor and as chief of staff to the then acting defense secretary. What makes Patel's nomination as the FBI director worth discussing is the fact that Patel himself was a staunch and outspoken critic of the FBI, often accusing the department of corruption and demanding what he calls a 247 declassification. His vision for the FBI includes significant structural changes, such as shutting down its Washington headquarters and redistributing its operations across the country. Patel has referred to the current FBI headquarters as a potential museum of the deep state. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now have a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. Cyclone Fengal is making landfall in India's southern half. Winds are reaching 70 to 80 kilometers per hour, with gusts up to 90. Heavy rains began on Friday night, causing widespread flooding. South estates of Tamil Nadu and Puducherry have been affected the most. Major roads are submerged while public transport services are on hold. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said he is ready to engage with Elon Musk. This comes after Musk criticised the government's ban on under-16s using social media. It requires social media companies to take steps to prevent young teens from creating accounts. The law will take effect in 12 months' time. The death toll from sectarian violence in the Kurram district, Pakistan, has reached 124. Local officials say 16 more people died in armed clashes in the past 24 hours alone. Over 170 others were injured, many critically. The violence began on November the 21st when armed men attacked a passenger convoy, killing 52, including women and children. This sparked clashes between Shiite and Sunni Muslims. Tensions are growing between the US and China over semiconductor technology. The Biden administration is planning curbs on chip exports to China and a blacklist of 200 companies. China's Commerce Ministry spokesperson On He-dong opposed the move. He said the US was abusing export controls as these actions could disrupt global trade. Bangladeshi police have arrested 9 people linked to the murder of a lawyer. The suspects are among 46 named in the case, most are sanitation workers from the Hindu minority community. The lawyer was killed during clashes over workplace issues. The violence escalated into communal tensions. Police say the arrested individuals participated in the violence. Heavy flooding from intense rainfall in Malaysia and Thailand has killed at least 12 people. Over 122,000 people have been displaced in northern Malaysia. Around 13,000 others have been forced from their homes in southern Thailand. The death toll may rise as heavy rain and storm warnings continue. Emergency services are rescuing stranded residents and shelters are being set up for those displaced. Clashes between police and Georgian citizens have raged on for a third day. Law enforcement used tear gas and rubber bullets outside of Georgia's parliament, with protesters angry over a delay to EU accession talks. Here is the latest from Tbilisi.
Violent clashes between the police and protesters have been raging on for a third night in Georgia's capital. Pro-European Union supporters have been protesting against a recent announcement that Georgia's ruling party will pause EU accession talks until 2028. Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze's comments came following a controversial election result in favour of the Georgian Dream Party. The European Parliament has called for a new election, with questions raised over the legitimacy of the result. Around 160 diplomats have criticised the delay in EU talks, citing the potential of international isolation. These views have been shared by thousands of citizens who have been protesting in Tbilisi, outside of the parliamentary building. In response, law enforcement has used water cannons, rubber bullets and tear gas in an attempt to disperse protesters. At least 100 protesters have been detained over the 3 days of action. Georgia's President Salome Zurabishvili says that people are protesting for a new election and not a revolution, while suggesting she will not step down following the election result.
And I'm legitimate as long as there is no new legitimate president. So as long as there are no new elections, new parliament electing under the new rules, a new president who will be inaugurated, my mandate continues.
It remains to be seen if further protests will take place in Tbilisi over the coming days, with large proportions of the country hoping to get back on the European path. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's take a look at some news stories from the world of business. The South Korean main opposition Democratic Party has announced plans to introduce a downsized budget bill for next year. The bill is set to be presented in a plenary National Assembly session this week. This follows the party pushing the 2025 budget bill through a parliamentary committee. This move comes despite a boycott from the ruling People Power Party. Nissan Chief Financial Officer Stephen Mahas announced his departure from the position. This marks another executive change amid ongoing challenges for the car maker. It remains unclear whether Ma will be demoted or leave the company. This change follows the departure of Ashwani Gupta as COO 17 months ago. It also comes after the announcement of plans to cut 9,000 jobs and reduce manufacturing capacity by 20%. Black Friday spending in the US retail stores has been muted this year with a modest 0.7% year-on-year increase. This is according to MasterCard's preliminary estimates. In contrast, online sales saw a more robust rise as shoppers favoured phones and laptops over in-store visits. Data firm Factious reported even lower in-store sale figures. JP Morgan Chase has agreed to drop its lawsuit against Tesla. The lawsuit accused the electric vehicle maker of breaching a 2014 contract related to warrants sold to the bank. The decision to dismiss the lawsuit was announced in a joint court filing in Manhattan. Both companies confirmed they would drop their claims against each other. Elon Musk is seeking a federal court order to prevent OpenAI from transitioning into a fully for-profit business. Musk, his AI startup Jay, and former OpenAI board member Shivon Zilis filed for a preliminary injunction on Friday. They aim to block OpenAI from allegedly restricting investors from funding competitors, including Jay. Britain's Institute of Directors reported on Sunday that optimism among members has dropped to the lowest level since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. This follows tax increases in Finance Minister Rachel Reeves' first budget on October the 30th. Investment plans and employment intentions were the weakest since May 2020, while business leaders' optimism fell to -65. This is the lowest level since April 2020, down from -52 in October. That is all we have time for. We'll be back with more news updates from across the world shortly.